Can you defy fate, if fate already knew you would try? There's a moment early in Guts' life that answers this question before he even knows to ask it. He's maybe 6 years old, swinging a sword nearly as tall as he is. Gambino, the mercenary who bought him for 3 coins, watches with cold assessment. The boy's form is wrong, his stance unstable, but he refuses to stop, refuses to cry, refuses to quit. Gambino doesn't see potential. He sees a tool being forged. Every swing of that oversized blade, every muscle torn and rebuilt, every lesson beaten into small bones, it's all preparation. Not for Guts' benefit, but for Gambino's profit. A child soldier is cheaper than hiring an adult. More disposable, too. But here's what Gambino didn't account for. The tool was learning to think. Years later, Guts would ask himself why he kept swinging that sword. Was it choice? Or was it simply what happens when you give a child born from a corpse no other option for survival? If your choices are become a weapon or die, is choosing the weapon really a choice at all? This question haunts every step of Berserk's narrative. Not in abstract philosophical terms, but in blood and consequence. Because Kentaro Miura didn't construct a thought experiment about determinism, he built a universe where fate has teeth, where causality isn't metaphorical but mechanical, and then he dropped a man into it who refuses to accept the script. Let's trace how that refusal plays out. Start with Griffith. Because inevitability isn't a prophecy in Berserk. It's built. Picture this. You're Griffith, born in poverty, beautiful and brilliant, but fundamentally powerless. The world tells you that your birth determines your destiny. Peasants stay peasants. Nobles stay nobles. The system is fixed. So you dream. Not a small dream, not a reasonable dream, but a dream so massive it requires stepping on everyone who gets in your way. A kingdom, not to serve one, to possess one. To take the thing that birth denied you and seize it through pure will. Every mercenary you recruit, every battle you win, every moral compromise you make, it's all fuel for that singular vision. The Band of the Hawk isn't just a company. It's a machine converting blood into social ascension. And it works. Against all probability, the bastard from the slums becomes the White Hawk, catches the king's eye, gets closer to his impossible dream than anyone with his background should. Then Guts walks away. One man decides he needs his own dream, and everything collapses. Griffith's carefully constructed destiny unravels. He makes a catastrophic mistake with Princess Charlotte. A year of torture follows. When the Hawks finally rescue him, what emerges from that cell isn't the Golden Leader, but a broken thing that can't hold a sword, can't speak, can't even feed itself. His dream died. Or did it? Because in Griffith's hand, activated by his tears of absolute despair, the Behelit pulses red. This isn't coincidence. The Behelit has been with him since the beginning, waiting. Not randomly, specifically. It knew. Somehow, impossibly, this demonic artifact knew that Griffith would reach this exact moment of maximum desperation. When reality tears open and the God hand descends, Void explains how it works. Causality. The flow of destiny that governs all events. Griffith didn't stumble into this moment. His entire life, his ambition, his beauty, his intelligence, his dream, every choice he made and battle he won, all of it was the mechanism delivering him here. To this question, to this offer. Sacrifice everything you built to become something transcendent. Void tells him, you will make the choice you're fated to make. Think about that phrasing. Not, you have no choice. Not, we're forcing you. But your choice is predetermined by who you are. The decision is genuine. The will is real. But the outcome was never in doubt because the person making the choice was constructed specifically to make it. Griffith looks at his broken body, looks at the hawks who ruined themselves rescuing him, looks at his dead dream, and he makes the only choice his character architecture permits. He says yes. The sacrifice happens. The eclipse begins, and suddenly the philosophical question has corpses. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because to understand why this matters, we need to understand what causality actually is in Berserk's universe. And for that, we need to talk about a chapter most readers have never seen. Because the horror isn't that there's a god. The horror is who made it. Chapter 83 of Berserk, later removed from canon but philosophically essential, reveals something disturbing: the idea of evil. A pulsating mass of consciousness residing at the heart of the abyss, explaining itself to a confused Griffith immediately after his rebirth as Femto. It tells him a story. Humanity suffered. Random tragedy, meaningless death, chaos without purpose. And collectively, unconsciously, humanity wished for reason. They needed suffering to make sense. So their collective unconscious desire manifested a god whose sole purpose was to give them exactly what they asked for. The idea of evil created causality. It engineered a system where everything happens for a reason, where suffering has purpose, where the randomness that terrified humanity was replaced with cosmic order. It shaped history, manipulated events, ensured certain outcomes, not to benefit humanity, but to give them the meaningful suffering they unconsciously demanded. The God Hand are its agents. 5 beings who ascended through sacrifice, now existing outside normal time, able to see causality's flow as a completed pattern. They don't create fate, they administer it. They find the crucial moments, the turning points where a human's despair and circumstance align perfectly, and they offer the deal. Your everything for power, your humanity for transcendence, your bonds for apotheosis. And according to the idea of evil, even the choice to accept or refuse is predetermined. Because it knows you. It shaped the events that formed you. It understands your psychology better than you do. When it offers you the deal, it already knows your answer. The question is just a formality. This is determinism at its most nightmarish. Not just that events follow causal chains, but that those chains were deliberately constructed by a god humanity accidentally created to trap themselves in a cage of meaning. Guts heard none of this explanation. He doesn't know about the idea of evil. But he understands causality intimately because he's been fighting it his entire life. Now bring it back to Guts. Because fate doesn't just pull strings. It writes people. Go back to that child swinging an oversized sword. Guts didn't choose to be born from a hanged woman's corpse, didn't choose to be found by mercenaries, didn't choose to be sold by Gambino for 3 coins, didn't choose the assault that followed, didn't choose the murder attempt that made him kill the only father figure he knew. Every trauma was inflicted by circumstances outside his control, and every trauma wrote code into his developing psychology. Don't trust, don't attach. Don't expect anything but betrayal. Survive alone, because anything else is a weakness waiting to be exploited. This is what philosophers call the problem of moral luck. Guts' character wasn't chosen, it was constructed by random chance and cruelty. The experiences that made him who he is weren't selected from a menu of options. They were forced upon him. So when he acts according to his nature, suspicious, isolated, self-destructive, is he choosing those actions or simply running programming he didn't write? When he first meets the Band of the Hawk, he rejects them, fights Griffith, loses, gets conscripted. He doesn't want to be there. But slowly, against every instinct his childhood coded into him, he opens up. Casca's persistence breaks through. The hawk's acceptance matters. For the first time, belonging seems possible. Was this growth? Or was it simply the next stage in his development, as inevitable as his initial rejection? His trauma created the conditions where genuine connection, once found, would matter more than anything. The very experiences that made him push people away also ensured that if someone broke through his defenses, they'd become everything. He couldn't choose his programming, and he couldn't choose his response to that programming being challenged. The feeling of choice, of growth, of deciding to be vulnerable. Maybe that's just consciousness narrating a path it was always going to walk. Then Guts overhears Griffith tell Princess Charlotte, "I don't think of anyone I can't control as a true friend." One sentence rewrites everything, all the belonging, all the connection, recontextualized. He wasn't Griffith's equal. He was useful. A prized piece on the board, but ultimately a piece. So Guts leaves, defeats Griffith in a duel, and walks away to find his own dream, his own reason to exist beyond being someone's weapon. But here's the causality trap. His decision to leave was shaped entirely by his childhood trauma. The hypervigilance against being used, the inability to tolerate being owned, the need to prove his existence matters independently, all of it emerged from Gambino's abuse. He didn't choose to be the kind of person who would react to Griffith's words by leaving. His history chose for him, and that decision, made by a man running code written by trauma, triggered the cascade that led to the Eclipse. Griffith's breakdown. His mistake with Charlotte. The torture, the broken shell, the Behelit activation. If Guts hadn't left, would the Eclipse have happened? Causality suggests yes, through some other mechanism. But from Guts's perspective, his choice to find freedom destroyed everyone he loved. Was it really his choice, though? Or was it the inevitable response of a specific psychology encountering a specific trigger? And if it was inevitable, does that absolve him of responsibility for what followed? The brand of sacrifice doesn't care about these questions. It marks him anyway. Then the oldest witness steps out of the dark, Skull Knight. Not to save Guts, to warn him what the world is. Skull Knight appears in Guts's life like a prophecy in armor. This being, ancient beyond measure, has fought the God Hand across centuries. He's survived multiple eclipses. He's seen the pattern repeat so many times that he exists partially outside it, able to perceive causality's flow more clearly than any normal human. And his first words to Guts are a warning disguised as a koan. You will make the choice you're fated to make. Not you have no choice. Not resistance is futile. But something more philosophically complex. Your choice is real. Your will is genuine. But the choice you make will be the one you were always going to make because of who you are. He tells Guts this repeatedly in various forms. When Guts considers using the Behelit he carries, Skull Knight warns him. When Guts plans to rescue Casca from dangerous situations, Skull Knight appears to say the rescue will cost him. When Guts faces impossible odds, Skull Knight acknowledges the futility, but doesn't tell him to stop. Because Skull Knight understands something crucial. Even if the struggle is predetermined, the struggle still defines you. He's fought for perhaps 1,000 years. By any rational measure, his war against the God Hand is unwinnable. Void still exists. Causality remains unbroken. The eclipses keep happening. Yet he continues. Why? Maybe because he's learned what Guts is still discovering. That in a deterministic universe, authenticity is the only freedom possible. Not freedom from your nature, but freedom through your nature expressed so completely that the question of choice becomes irrelevant. Skull Knight doesn't fight because he believes he'll win. He fights because fighting is what he is. His will, whether determined or free, is expressed with such totality that the distinction collapses. And he sees the same pattern in Guts. The brand says die. Guts says not yet. Every night, demons come. Every night, Guts kills them. He should have succumbed years ago. Probability says he should be dead. Causality suggests his survival serves some purpose. But what if his survival serves no purpose except itself? What if he's the variable that causality didn't weight heavily enough? The God Hand accounted for human ambition, human weakness, human despair. Maybe they underestimated human spite. If your limits disappear, you don't become free. You become dangerous. When Flora offers Guts the Berserker Armor, she explains exactly what it is. The armor doesn't make you stronger. It removes the limiters, pain that would make you stop fighting, exhaustion that would make you collapse, injuries that would kill you. The armor overrides all of it. You can fight beyond human capability until your body destroys itself from the inside. It's a literalization of the philosophical problem Guts embodies. If you remove all constraints on the will, what happens? You get power beyond measure and lose your humanity in the process. The first time Guts dons it, he becomes something else. Not Guts anymore, but the beast of darkness made manifest. The thing that's been growing inside him since the Eclipse, the part that wants only to kill and destroy, it takes the wheel. He defeats enemies he couldn't touch before. He also nearly kills Casca, the person he's trying to protect. Flora's warning was explicit. Each use brings him closer to losing himself entirely. The armor will consume him. He'll become an apostle in all but name, a monster that looks like a man but functions on pure bloodlust. Guts understands this. Wears it anyway. Is this choice? His need to protect Casca and hunt apostles is so overwhelming, so central to his identity, that refusing the armor isn't a real option. He's aware of the cost, aware of the danger, but his psychology doesn't permit alternate paths. Given who he is, given what he values, he cannot choose differently. Determinism would argue this proves the point. His childhood trauma created a personality that needs to protect the few people he has left. That need is so fundamental that it overrides self-preservation. The choice to wear the armor, therefore, was determined by causal chains written decades ago by Gambino's abuse and the Eclipse's trauma. But watch what Guts does inside the armor. He fights the beast. When it tries to take control, when his consciousness starts to fragment, he pulls himself back. Not always successfully, but he tries. There's something in him that won't surrender completely even to his own darkness. Or is that another layer of programming, some survival instinct deeper than the trauma, refusing to be erased? The question spirals infinitely. Every explanation generates another question. Every assertion of freedom can be reframed as determined response. And Guts doesn't care about the philosophy. He swings his sword. Now look back at Griffith. Because destiny always sends an invoice. And he paid it in people. Now Femto, fifth member of the God Hand, he exists partially outside time. He can see causality more clearly than any human. And from that perspective, everything that happened was inevitable. His birth in poverty generated the ambition. The ambition generated the dream. The dream required the Hawks. The Hawks required Guts. Guts' presence raised Griffith to unprecedented heights. Guts' departure shattered Griffith's psychology. The shattered psychology led to the mistake. The mistake to the torture. The torture led to the Behelit activation. The activation led to the sacrifice. The sacrifice led to transcendence. Every link in the chain necessary. Every choice predetermined by the prior choice. The only way it doesn't happen is if Griffith was born different, which requires different parents, different circumstances, ultimately a completely different person. From Femto's perspective, the sacrifice wasn't murder, it was completion, causality, expressing itself through him. The Hawks weren't really people. They were pieces of his past that had to be shed for him to become his future. Their suffering wasn't cruelty. It was function. This is what makes Griffith philosophically terrifying. He's not just a villain, he's determinism personified. He accepted Causality's offer completely, surrendered his humanity to become the instrument of fate itself. And from his new vantage point, he looks back at his human concerns and sees them as illusions. Love, friendship, loyalty, all the things that made the Hawks matter to him, recontextualized as evolutionary psychology. Useful emotions that served his development, but ultimately disposable once he transcended the human condition. But here's what Femto can't explain. Why does Guts still bother him? When they meet again post-Eclipse, when Guts manages to wound him, Femto's reaction isn't the detached amusement of a god facing an insect. It's something else. Something that looks like recognition. Maybe even concern, because Guts is the variable that doesn't fit the equation. According to Causality, he should have died at the Eclipse. The brand guarantees his death, yet he survives. Year after year, against all probability, he survives. And more than survives, he hunts. He kills apostles. He moves toward confrontation with the God hand itself. Femto, from his perspective outside time, should be able to see Guts' eventual fate, should know whether this rebellion succeeds or fails. But he doesn't act like he knows. He acts like Guts is a problem he hasn't solved yet. What if the problem is unsolvable? What if Guts represents something Causality didn't account for? Will expressed so absolutely that it creates localized chaos in the system. This is the truth Miura leaves you with. You can be trapped and still refuse to kneel. So we return to the question. Can you defy fate if fate already knew you would try? Guts doesn't know the answer. He might not even understand the question in philosophical terms. But he has a response, written in every swing of the Dragon Slayer, every demon killed, every impossible survival. The response is, I don't care. Whether his rebellion is predetermined or genuine, whether his choices are free or determined, whether Causality will ultimately subsume his resistance or he'll carve an exception into its laws, the only response that maintains his humanity is to fight as if his choices matter. Because in the moment of choosing, they do matter. They constitute who he is. And if who he is determined, then his determination is simply being himself, with such totality that the question of freedom becomes irrelevant. The brand of sacrifice marks him for death. He's still alive. Who's right, the brand or Guts? Maybe both. Maybe he's cosmically designated for destruction, and simultaneously refusing that designation. And both things are true because the universe is complicated enough to contain paradoxes. Skull Knight has fought for centuries. Guts has fought for years. Both know the God hand remains untouchable. Both keep fighting. Not because they believe they'll win, but because fighting is what they are. Their will, whether free or determined, expressed authentically. And here's what makes Berserk philosophically profound. It never resolves the paradox. It demonstrates that living meaningfully might not require resolution. That you can inhabit the tension between fate and freedom without collapsing it into a neat answer. Guts is both fated and free. His responses are determined by his character, which was formed by his experiences, which were shaped by circumstances beyond his control. Yet those determined responses are genuinely his, expressions of who he authentically is. When Gambino tried to kill him, and Guts survived by killing back, was that choice or programming? When he left the Hawks to find his own dream, was that growth or predetermined response? When he dons the Berserker armor knowing it will consume him, is that sacrifice or inevitability, all of the above, simultaneously. The question contains a false dichotomy. Modern philosophers call this compatibilism. The idea that free will and determinism aren't contradictory, but describe the same reality from different frames. Your choices are determined by your character. Your character is authentically yours. Therefore, determined choices are still meaningfully free if they express your authentic self. Guts doesn't know this philosophy. He just lives it. He's the most determined character in any story, simultaneously in both senses of the word. Determined by causality's chains, and determined to break them. And maybe breaking them just means being yourself so completely that the chains become irrelevant. So what's left when you can't win? When the universe is rigged, and you know it? There's a scene late in Berserk where Guts sits with his new companions, Shirka, Isidro, Farnese, Serpico, Magnifico, and for a moment, he's almost peaceful, almost normal. The brand still marks him. Demons will still come. Casca's mind is still shattered. His war against the God Hand remains unwinnable. But in that moment, with people who chose to follow him knowing the cost, he's created something causality didn't script. Connection, despite impossibility. Maybe that's the answer. Not whether you're free or fated, but what you do within whatever frame you're operating. Guts can't choose to not be branded, can't choose to not be hunted, can't choose to not have lost everything at the Eclipse. These are outside his control. But he can choose his response. Or if his response is determined, he can be the kind of person whose determined response is defiance. The distinction collapses when authenticity is absolute. The God Hand says everything happens for a reason. Guts says he doesn't care. His suffering doesn't need cosmic purpose. His rebellion doesn't need metaphysical validation. He swings his sword because that's what he is. Determined or free, it doesn't matter. The swing is the same. And in a universe where causality claims dominion over all outcomes, maybe sustained refusal is the only freedom possible. Not freedom from determination, but freedom through determination so complete it creates its own meaning. That's Berserk's philosophical gift. Not an answer, but a demonstration that the question of fate versus free will might be less important than the quality of your engagement with existence. That authentic determination, whether free or fated, generates meaning through its expression. Can you defy fate if fate already knew you would try? Guts' response isn't yes or no. It's the sound of steel hitting demon flesh. It's surviving another night. It's refusing to accept that his suffering has to mean what the God Hand says it means. The struggle might be predetermined. The struggle might be doomed. The struggle might be exactly what causality intended. Doesn't matter. He keeps swinging anyway. And maybe that's all freedom ever was. Being who you are so completely that nothing can make you be otherwise, even fate itself.